Welcome back to the Entrusted Podcast, the place where we dive deep into leadership, service, and the human side of education. I'm your host, and today's episode is both a welcome and a farewell. It's called Hello and Goodbye. More on that in a minute. But first, if you've been with us since season 1, you'll remember our next guest. His episode was one of the most talked about conversations of the season, and we knew right then we needed him back. In fact, we're making him a regular voice here on the Entrusted Podcast. So please help me welcome back to the program Kirk Leday. Kirk and I share a special connection. We've both walked the path as chiefs of staff and heads of human resources, but his journey to leadership is one that inspires us at every turn. Born in Louisiana, Kirk moved to Chicago with his family, which turned him into a diehard White Sox fan early on. And so he went to college at Knox College and went into the Army, was an officer there, and has really done well in school leadership. In fact, he was a high school principal in Colorado before he entered the world of human resources. And now he's chief of staff for an organization over 1,000 employees. So with every conversation, we're talking about transitions today. We're going to talk about opportunities when you, as a leader, have to say hello and goodbye. Sometimes we're expecting those, sometimes we're not, and sometimes it's really tough because we have to talk about hello when we're recruiting, which is happy, and sometimes farewell or goodbye when it doesn't work out. So with that, Kirk, welcome to the Entrusted. Welcome back to the Entrusted. We're glad you're here.
Thanks for having me. I just wish that you wouldn't have mentioned the White Sox this year after coming off a historic losing season. They're off to maybe a couple of games better, but there is hope. The Rockies will finish with a worse record than the White Sox.
I started to say the only thing worse than the White Sox this season would probably be the Colorado Rockies, and so that's just how the cookie crumbles, so to speak. But well, in human resources, we deal with a lot of highs and lows, and I think one of the things that people always think about in human resources is you get to hire people, and sometimes you have to fire people. And sometimes it's a really big high when you yourself get a different opportunity for that next job or that next thing. So let's just talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Let's talk about some of those. Let's talk about the highs first, and then we'll get to that tougher conversation here in a minute. But
Sure.
talk about your experience.
Yeah, the highs of finding a new employee for your organization is one of the ultimate highs that you can have because you're looking at people and you're projecting them forward into whatever role they may have coming into your organization, and it's really exciting. You're learning about them, they're learning about your organization, and you're trying to figure out that individual fit. So that part is certainly exhilarating, and one of our goals in our organization is that we want to hire the best and the brightest from wherever we may find them.
What are some of the funny stories about recruiting? I mean, I know I probably have a few myself with that, but I know you're hard at it. Recruiting season used to be just in the spring, but now it's year round.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep, it's absolutely year round. I don't know if I told this one last time, but I was at a fair at Loyola University outside of Chicago, and I'm interviewing this young man, and he looks really professional. He has a suit on. I mean, it's just immaculate, and we're going back and forth, and then I noticed something on his sleeve, and it's the tag. And so I don't say anything to him through the entire interview. And then after the interview was over, and I said, "Hey, you forgot to take your tag off." And he said, "No, I didn't." He said, "This suit has to go back."
Well, it doesn't matter if you told us that before or not. It's so funny and it's so real, right?
Yep.
I think one of the funniest ones, it wasn't funny for the poor person who was the candidate, walking up to a table one time, and she was a young lady, and she was dressed to the nines, and she had a pair of high heels on, and she started to take a step, and she couldn't move because her heel got stuck in between the tile or the crack or in the hall where we were, and she had to take her shoe off in order to walk over to the table. And I'm thinking, oh, way to make a first impression. I'm sure she's dying right now, like dying a slow death. There's a level of awkward that goes
Absolutely.
on with
Yeah.
some of this.
Yeah, I had another one that just happened about 3 weeks ago at another fair. So we got new material, recruiting materials, and we got new tablecloths. So I get to the place, and I'm in between a couple of districts, and I can't get the tablecloth to fit because it's a fitted one. And I'm stretching it, I'm pulling it, I'm turning it, and I can't figure out how to do it. So I run out in the hallway and then I call back to my office. I was like, can somebody help me figure this out?
You didn't YouTube it?
No. And they said, well, you got to it's a fitted one. You got to hook it under the legs and pull it up over the top. I was turning it left and right, and it was like a puzzle. I couldn't figure it out. So finally, I just folded it up, put it back in the bag, and I just put my materials just right on the table.
Yeah. You have to be able to improvise no matter what.
I couldn't figure it out.
So did they help you ever figure it out when you got back?
I did. I brought it back into the office, and, they showed me how to do it. And I'm like, well, why did we order these?
Well, you have to test drive your materials before you get out there and do the real show then, I
Well,
guess.
you would have thought that somebody would have alerted me to it, but obviously they thought I was smarter than I actually am.
So, well, I think one of the things that always excited me when I was superintendent, let's fast forward from being an HR and being a deputy, and when I went to the superintendency, it still excited me just as much as it did when I was a director in human resources to watch those faces of those new teachers walk in the first day. And I know you do a beautiful job, and maybe some of the people listening who are in charge of some of this work could learn a little bit. You do a beautiful job of providing an opening day for those new teachers before the rest of the world comes back to work and hits them. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, we think it's really important as a part of the onboarding process to welcome all of our new employees in. So we have a huge breakfast set in a beautiful location overlooking a lake, and we bring them all in. We offer them breakfast. They get to sit in their like school groups, and they get to hear from us a welcome message from the superintendent, from myself, from other directors, and then we just basically want to have them understand that we are a family. And last year we started something where we would roll out a red carpet so candidates get to walk across the red carpet.
That's cool.
And we would have all of our administrators line up on both sides, basically clapping as each
Kind
of
of
the
a
individuals,
high-five line.
high-fiving them as they go through, and just the sense of fulfillment that I actually saw in some faces that they said, boy, I didn't anticipate all of this. And it was just a really good tradition that we continue to follow.
I read something from a business journal a few years ago that said the first 3 days and a new employee joins an organization, they make their mind up about how long they're going to be in that organization. Did they make the right choice? Because they have a choice, right?
Sure.
The job market used to be the employers, but now we know recruiting is year-round in the pipeline, and we're always trying to find the right people because that's key to the performance of your school or your organization. And I think this opening really sets the stage because I've heard people talk along the way over the years about how that made them feel welcome.
Yeah.
And if you can help someone bond to that organization right up front.
Yeah. And I think you hit on something that I think is very, very crucial that, we're continuing to evolve and work with all of our hiring managers, is that you are interviewing someone, and that person is also interviewing you.
That's right.
So they want to understand not necessarily about the nuances of the particular job. They want to understand about you. I'm committing myself to be under your leadership. So how are you going to take care of me?
Right.
And so it's extremely important to understand that sometimes, people don't necessarily want to know about all the nuances of the job. They want to know about where can I live? What happens if this happens to me, especially if you're talking about a person just graduating from college.
Right. And I know in your situation, you have to convince people that you don't freeze to death in Colorado, right?
Absolutely. It's always, with the advent of the iPhone, I frequently will pull my phone up when people say, well, isn't it cold there? And I always ask the question, well, where did you get that? They say, well, I saw a Bronco game once on
Uh
Monday
huh.
Night Football
Uh
where it
huh.
was snowing.
Or the ski slopes, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then I show them the weather forecast, and I'm like, it's always sunny. And I said, for the most part, I don't even wear an overcoat all winter. And they're somewhat taken aback. But once they start to do a little bit of research and they see how actually beautiful it is and how the weather is, it's for the most part mild.
Yeah. And I think for people to be able to uproot and move, relocate to another location, that's important. One thing before we get to the other side of the coin here, I think sometimes generations at work, we have multiple generations at work now.
Mhm.
Some people are second career, some people are fresh out of college. But even our kids are another generation on the campuses. I think for the first time in history, we have 6 generations at work, according to Tim Elmore,
Yeah, yeah,
and a book about a new kind of diversity.
yeah.
And I think that the workforce has changed in their expectations, especially post pandemic. What
Yeah.
have you noticed about that?
Well, one of the things, and you're absolutely right about the different generations in the workforce, that this past year I've spent quite a bit of time understanding some of the nuances of different generations. But what I think is important in the workforce is that we have a good appreciation of those particular generations. I can remember back being a kid and, my grandparents' generation, if you were a boy and you had long hair, you were the devil's seed. And so, we
That
would
was a Louisiana thing,
that was
wasn't it?
Louisiana thing. We would go visit my grandparents, and it would be about 9 or 10 of my first cousins, and we'd always be sitting on the porch. And it's the first day we got there. My grandfather brings a chair out, put it on the porch, and he says, "You boys are going to get a haircut."
Ah.
And each of us had to take our turn, and whether you had an afro or you had long locks or whatever it was, by the end of the day, we all looked the same.
So it was nothing new when you were an officer in the
No,
military, right?
no, I
When you
was
hit
I
that,
was totally
you
ready
were
for
ready
that.
for it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I think a couple things I've noticed on the generations, and not to overgeneralize. I don't want to stereotype anybody, but there are things that different generations value.
Hmm.
I recently read an article by the same author, Tim Elmore, and it was the whole Shador Sanders
Hmm.
thing. How he was passed over on the NFL draft for, like, wasn't it day 3 before
Yeah.
he got the offer? And the notion there on that article was parents sometimes try to help their kids too much. And the notoriety of his father, who is, of course, the University of Colorado's Buffs
Yeah.
football coach,
Yeah.
that didn't help him. And so, had he been a little more anonymous or not so flashy in the mainstream, that would have helped. And what I found is with people coming into the industry, they do want to prove it on their own.
Sure.
I think, but they value different things. Millennials, I think, was the first generation where they wanted their life and work too, unlike my parents, and it was hard work, hard work, hard work,
Right.
and that came second.
Yeah.
How you get the benefit was you had a great life.
Yeah.
Now it's Gen Z.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And Gen Z, the other day I sent something to someone that I know, Gen Z, and it took a minute to even, like a day or two before I even got, this is a nephew, before I got a call back. Oh, sorry, Aunt Pam. I, was doing X, Y, and Z. So it's just the nuances are important. What would you say in terms of advice to the listeners about people who are hiring for their organization about that?
Yeah, I would definitely say you want to spend some time at least understanding some different perspectives. And then as you are looking at basically onboarding some young folk, and I say young folk as a Southern term,
Right.
uh, into your organization, it's paramount that you understand some things that they value. And one of the most difficult things that I'm finding as I learn this is not necessarily learning about it, but it's basically accepting it for what it is because we're not going to change it.
Okay.
And, again, I go back to being a kid, and I remember hearing the older generation saying that, my generation, they were going to go to hell in a handbasket
Right.
because, we did things differently. Bell bottoms were, a fashion statement, and
Ooh,
they
you're dating
didn't like
yourself
that.
now.
Yeah, yeah. But it turned out okay. And I am a firm believer that this particular generation will also turn out just fine. And I think it's the onus is on us to make sure that we can accept some of the things that they find to be important.
Yeah. Well, good advice. Good advice there for knowing your audience when you're hiring.
Yes.
I guess, and taking the time to learn about them. Um, let's flip the script now. I think for some leaders, especially if they're new into their jobs,
Yeah.
they might be afraid when it comes time to make a hard decision about someone you've invested in
Yeah.
and someone you recruited and you hired, but it's not working out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So walk the audience through that.
Sure.
What's your train of thought in terms of hearing first time from like a principal, this person's not working out, and it can happen at any time during the year, right?
Sure, it can.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is important is let's use a principal as an example. The first questions I would ask are, okay, tell me what it is you're observing. And then I say, have we set clear expectations? If we've set clear expectations for performance from this employee and they're just not doing it, so then it comes another question. Is this simply a matter of, I want to say, remediation, that simply we have to do some additional training or support for this person? Or is it truly a situation where it's just not going to be a good fit in our organization? So if the situation is you simply have to provide more support, or you simply have to do some additional training, maybe get a different mentor, then that's one thing. But if the conclusion comes up that, hey, we have tried all those things and it's just not working, and the employee is not willing to commit to changing some behaviors or changing some things that they do, then that unfortunate decision has to be made where you say it's in the best interest of the organization and all of the children that we have is that we separate employment from that individual.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean it's a bad person.
Absolutely not.
I go back to, remember the Wizard of Oz?
Yep.
And she said, he's not a bad man. He's just a bad wizard, right? Or words to that effect. I'm probably not quoting it correctly. Because sometimes if you're thinking it's not a good fit as a supervisor, what I've learned is sometimes they think the same thing, but they're just not sure. They're kind of caught.
Yeah.
And I have seen actual relief on people's faces sometimes when we've had to bring that issue up. Yeah. What have you done when it's been more of a personality conflict? Everybody's human. Not everybody gets along with everybody.
Yeah.
Shocker, right? But what if it's a great employee or a good employee that you want to give a chance to, but you just know it's oil and water?
Yeah.
with that supervisor.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, then especially if we've invested and done some training in this employee, that we want to see if we have another opportunity that might fit a little bit better. And we have had instances where that's been very, very successful, that because of maybe the dynamics in one location, it's just not working. But then we move that employee to another location and it's just fantastic.
And they bloom.
And they bloom. We had an employee who worked in the culinary department, and we went through the process of basically uh, outsourcing our culinary. And so we moved one of our employees to an office in a building. And I happened to just be there about a month ago, and I saw her, and she said, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I was like, "Yep, I remember you." And she chewed my head off because she thought it was unfair that she was being removed from one position and put into another. And then she basically said it was the best thing that ever happened to me. She said, I would have never got the opportunity to expand my horizons. And so she gave me a hug and she thanked me and she said, and I'm also sorry for all those things I said to you.
Oh, that's when you know you
Yeah.
go home and say, we
We
did a
did
good one
okay.
there. We did
We did
okay.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's paramount. If it's just not a good fit, if you can find another fit in your organization, I think that will benefit the employee, the organization, and any of the students that they serve.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes people get that sick feeling in their stomachs when they know that they're facing a difficult personnel um, decision. I have often said, if you have a human resources department, call 1-800-HR
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
you act, because I think that's the safest way to play that, so that you get the best advice possible. I like to say, don't make decisions when you're angry, when you're lonely, when you're sick.
Yeah.
Any of those things. And sometimes HR can be a real partner in that.
Yeah.
And you get a few of those calls, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely paramount when you're going to move on an employee, because what you find sometimes is even a written disciplinary action. If you read it beforehand, and if you've done this a while, you can see sometimes the anger that comes out. And it's not necessarily about, hey, here's what the employee did, here's the corrective action I'm asking you to do, and then here is the consequence if you don't do that. But you can see that, and then to your point of making sure that you have an HR partner that you can run these by, it will help alleviate a lot of issues that could come from it.
Yeah. I think one of the pieces of advice I would certainly give to anyone listening who might be facing this down the road is, remember, when you look at yourself in the mirror every morning, you're making a decision, in the case of education, for children. If it's a teacher, I've asked myself this question: would I have
Yeah.
my child in that person's class? And so go to the value system that we all have inside to be able to help guide some of those decisions too. But always remember, it's not about necessarily being a bad person. It's just the wrong fit
Yeah.
for that position. Separation of employment
Yeah.
is a tricky thing, but with a little help, you can get through it. And even transferring somebody, like you were talking
Yeah.
about, sometimes transfers are harder, I think, than actual separations of employment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even with administrators, right?
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes, for whatever reason, things just don't work. And I've used this story many times. I coached high school basketball, and we had some really good teams, and then we started to not have some good teams. And then I had an assistant coach, and I just racked my brain over and over and over again about what could I do differently to elicit a different result. Well, the result I chose was I was going to step away. My assistant took over, did the exact same things that I did, learned from me, but got better results. So you can't always quantify why something in one situation doesn't work, and then in the exact same situation with a different person, it works. And that's really difficult sometimes to get across to individuals, especially administrators, that, I don't think you did anything wrong. There was nothing that you did that any of us could say was foul, but for whatever reason, the dynamics just didn't work.
Yeah.
And maybe in a different position, maybe in a different school, you might have some success.
Yeah, the human variable.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because it worked in this pond doesn't necessarily mean if you're a fish in this pond, it's going to necessarily go the same way.
Yeah,
Right?
and there's no research out there that can quantify why this one worked and why it didn't when the variables are all the same.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we're all just trying to do the best we can in the right way. I don't think anybody
Absolutely.
goes to work every day trying to screw the organization up.
Well, maybe a couple of
Maybe a
people.
couple.
Yeah.
Those are not the hard
No,
ones to say
no.
goodbye to, I know. But those are few and far between. I think the last set of numbers I saw is something like 2 to 3% of an organization. Those are employees that are not performing.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Right.
But the majority of people are.
Yep.
And I think even when you have to make hard decisions, you have to remember to champion your champions,
Yep.
because that's really where the reward is at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Your thoroughbreds will always carry you through difficult times.
That's right. So in closing here, Kirk, is there anything else you think would be good advice for people in terms of the hiring and the firing and all the knots in your stomach along the way?
Yeah, I would just say one thing to keep in mind, excuse me, especially if you're recruiting in different states. You never know if that person is going to be a fit in your organization until you reach out. And I'll end this with one story. So as I was graduating from college, I went with about 3 friends and we studied together to a recruiting fair at Illinois State. One of my friends, her brother lived in Denver, so I was just waiting for her. She wanted to interview at Denver. So she completed her interview, and the recruiter, I think I still remember his name, David Wells. I was just standing there, and he said, "Hey, would you like to do a practice interview?" And I said, "No, I don't want one." And he said, I said, "I'm not interested in Denver." And he said, "Well, I don't have anybody here. Come sit down, and we'll do an interview, and I'll give you some feedback." So we do the interview, and after I finished, then he said, "Hey, let's take a walk." And so we're walking around campus, and I'm like, "Why is this guy walking me around campus?" And then he said, "Hey, we would love to hire you to come in Denver." And I said, "Well, I don't know anything." And he spent probably an hour with me talking to me about living in Denver, some of the opportunities, about places to live, about fun things to do. And what happened? I ended up coming to Denver when it wasn't even on my in my thought process.
And raised your family here.
Yeah,
And how
yeah.
many years ago was that, Kirk?
Oh gosh, I don't count past a certain number, so I don't go there. But I had a job offer in Hawaii, and I thought, no, I don't want to go to Hawaii because that was before we had cable TV, and I'm like, how am I going to watch the Bears?
Well, you just dated yourself,
Yeah.
whether you wanted to
Yeah,
or not.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but no, it all works out in the
Sure.
end there. But that guy was a good recruiter, it sounds
Absolutely,
like. So
absolutely.
he got your attention, and he took the time to get to know you.
And he also followed up. He sent me a couple of letters. That's letters before email. He sent me a letter, and he actually sent me a little magazine that showed different apartments that
Wow.
were available for rent.
Wow, that personal touch.
Yep, absolutely.
Never let go of the relationships and the personal touch.
Yep.
Well, Kirk, I want to thank you for being with us today. And I also want to thank the audience of The Entrusted. We're all issued a certain number of heartbeats, and you chose to spend some of those with us today, and I really appreciate it. And like I always used to tell our team at the end of a meeting, Kirk will remember this, rock on with your bad selves. You're doing important work.